Officer Daniels had been on the night shift for hours. The streets were quieter than usual, and the city seemed to be holding its breath under the dim glow of streetlights. He sipped the last bit of coffee from his travel mug, trying to shake off the drowsiness that was slowly creeping in. Night shifts were hard, and sometimes it felt like the only thing keeping him alert was the hope that something unexpected might happen. As he drove down a familiar stretch of road, his eyes caught a car that was slightly swerving in its lane. It wasn't erratic, but enough to make him sit up straight in his seat. He flicked on the patrol car's lights and followed the vehicle for a few moments, observing it carefully. After a short distance, he decided it was best to pull it over. He switched on the siren briefly, just enough to signal the driver to stop. The car slowed, and the driver carefully maneuvered it to the side of the road. Daniels parked behind the vehicle and stepped out, his boots clicking softly against the asphalt. He kept his hand near his belt, a habit from years of training, even though he had no reason to suspect real danger. The woman behind the wheel opened her door gracefully and stepped out. She appeared calm and composed. Her hair was neatly tied back, and she wore a simple jacket and jeans. There was nothing that seemed out of place, but Daniels noticed a certain confidence in the way she moved, a confidence that seemed unusual for someone being stopped by the police. "Good evening, ma'am. I'm Officer Daniels," he said politely, though there was an underlying tone of caution in his voice. "Do you know why I stopped you tonight?" The woman looked at him calmly, her eyes steady. "I'm not sure, officer. Was I speeding?" Daniels shook his head. "No, nothing like that. I noticed your car swerving a bit. I just wanted to make sure everything is okay." She nodded, understanding. "I'm sorry, I guess I was distracted for a moment. It won't happen again." Daniels could see the honesty in her face, but something still felt different. He requested her license and registration, and she handed them over without hesitation. As he walked back to his patrol car, he glanced at her carefully. She didn't fidget or show signs of nervousness. If anything, her composure made the situation feel even stranger. Back in his car, Daniels ran the documents through the system. As he waited for the results, he kept an eye on her. She stood quietly by her car, occasionally adjusting her posture, but mostly just watching the street. The night was silent, except for the soft hum of the patrol car's engine and the distant sound of traffic. The computer beeped softly, indicating that the check was complete. Daniels frowned slightly as he reviewed the screen. There was nothing illegal, no outstanding warrants, nothing unusual at all. He had expected at least a minor infraction, but everything was clear. He leaned back in his seat, thinking about how rare it was to have such a clean record. He stepped out again, holding the documents in his hand. "Everything looks fine, ma'am," he said, returning them to her. "I just wanted to make sure you were safe. Have a good night." "Thank you, officer." "I appreciate it," she replied, her tone calm and polite. She got back into her car and started the engine, giving him a small nod before driving off. Daniels watched her leave, a strange feeling lingering in his chest. There was something about her that didn't quite fit the ordinary. He couldn't place it, but it left him uneasy and curious. As he got back into his car, Daniels tried to shake off the feeling. Night shifts were full of odd encounters, and maybe this was just another one. Yet as he continued his patrol, he found himself glancing at the rearview mirror more often than usual, half expecting to see her car again. The thought of the encounter stayed with him for the rest of the night. It wasn't just her composure, but the sense that she carried a part of the world with her that Daniels didn't understand. He reminded himself that sometimes people were just private, cautious, or even anxious. Maybe she was just careful. Maybe she had her reasons for being so calm. He passed by a few more intersections, stopped to help a stranded motorist, and wrote a report about a minor accident. Yet, the image of the woman lingered in his mind. The way she had stood there, speaking to him politely but confidently, made him think about how many people in the world had secrets he would never know about. He shook his head, trying to focus on the work at hand. It was a long night, and there were more streets to patrol, more situations to handle, and more people to meet. Still, every time he drove past a quiet corner or saw a car stop at a red light, he found his mind wandering back to her. He wondered what she was doing that night, where she was headed, and why she seemed so different from anyone else he had pulled over before. It was a small moment, just a routine stop, but it had left a mark on him. By the time the night was winding down, Daniels had completed his rounds and returned to the station. He filed his reports, grabbed a snack from the vending machine, and sat down in the break room. He couldn't help but think about how life sometimes presented these small, fleeting encounters that stayed with you. It was almost like a story waiting to unfold, a mystery that didn't need a resolution right away. He smiled to himself, knowing that tonight of all nights had given him a reminder that the world was full of surprises, even in the most ordinary places. And while he didn't know it yet, this was just the beginning of something that would change the way he saw the world and the people in it. A reminder that even a simple traffic stop could lead to moments that were far from ordinary. The morning after the stop, the woman was already on the move. She had things to handle, appointments to keep, and a careful schedule she never liked to disrupt. Despite her desire for normalcy, her life was far from ordinary, though most people would never suspect it. She was always aware of how the world could react if they knew who she really was. She was the daughter of one of the most powerful people in the country, the CIA director, a fact she kept closely guarded. She wanted her life to be her own, but that was not easy. She parked her car in a quiet lot near a small coffee shop and walked in. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over the room. She ordered her usual drink, trying to enjoy a few moments of ordinary life. She always appreciated the small things, the simplicity of routine, though it was a luxury she didn't often get. Meanwhile, Officer Daniels returned home, still thinking about the woman from last night. He couldn't get her out of his mind. There was something about her calm demeanor and composed behavior that had stood out, something that hinted at a deeper story. He reminded himself that it was his job to serve and protect, not to pry into the private lives of people he encountered. But curiosity was a hard thing to ignore. Later that day, the woman received a call. She answered quietly, speaking in a soft, controlled voice. The call was brief, a quick check-in with someone she trusted. It was a reminder that she had responsibilities that went beyond herself, responsibilities that carried weight she often wished she could avoid. She ended the call and sat for a moment, thinking about the thin line she walked between a normal life and the life her family was tied to. She sipped her coffee, focusing on being present, even though the shadows of her father's position were never far away. Back at the station, Daniels was at his desk, reviewing reports from the night before. Even though everything about the stop had been routine, he found himself replaying the moments in his mind. There was a certain professionalism in the way she handled herself, a sense of awareness that went beyond the ordinary. It made him wonder what her life was really like, and whether everyone she met saw her the way he did, just a person, not a story, not a name, not a headline. He didn't realize that she was actively trying to live a life away from attention, just like him trying to do his job without judgment. Their lives were both shaped by responsibility and the need to act carefully, even if the reasons were different. He was bound by law and duty. She was bound by family and secrecy. Later that evening, she was walking through a quiet neighborhood park, enjoying the rare feeling of anonymity. The streetlights flickered as she walked along the path, the leaves rustling gently in the wind. She thought about her father, about the expectations placed on her, and about how much she valued the freedom to make her own choices, even small ones. These moments of solitude were precious, and she cherished them. Meanwhile, Daniels finished his shift and drove through the same neighborhoods, patrolling the streets as he always did. His mind kept wandering back to her. There was something about the way she carried herself that made him think she wasn't like anyone he had encountered before. He tried to put it out of his mind, focusing on the road, but the thought lingered, persistent and quiet. The following day, the woman went about her daily routine, careful to remain unnoticed, blending in as best she could. But she was always aware of the world around her, aware of how quickly normal interactions could spiral if her identity was revealed. She had learned to be cautious from a young age, understanding the power of discretion and the importance of maintaining boundaries. Daniels, meanwhile, had begun to do something he rarely allowed himself. He checked the department's system just to make sure everything had been in order. Nothing had come up, no tickets, no warnings, no issues. He filed his notes and closed the report, but the feeling of curiosity remained. He wondered about the lives people led beyond what he saw in brief encounters, about the hidden stories behind ordinary faces. Later that evening, the woman received another call, a short message that reminded her of duties she could not ignore. She smiled faintly, appreciating the trust placed in her even if it came with burdens. She was good at managing these calls, keeping them brief and efficient, never letting them disrupt her attempt at normalcy. She had to be careful, because any slip could have consequences that reached far beyond her own life. She returned to her apartment and looked out the window at the city lights. She thought about the encounter with the officer, about how nothing had gone wrong, yet how she had been aware of every detail in case it had. Her life was a series of careful calculations, balancing personal freedom with the weight of her family's influence. She closed the curtains, took a deep breath, and tried to focus on the present, though her mind could not help but wander. Daniels finished his evening paperwork and stepped outside. The air was cool, and he could see the city lights twinkling in the distance. He thought about the woman, about how some people carried more than the world could see, how a single encounter could be both ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. He realized that life often held surprises that didn't announce themselves, and sometimes they came in the most unexpected forms. The day ended quietly, but both the officer and the woman carried with them the memory of their encounter. For her, it was a reminder to remain cautious, to respect the ordinary and protect the extraordinary. For him, it was a reminder that even the most routine moments could hold depth and meaning if you paid attention. Neither knew that their paths would cross again, or how significant that encounter would become. But for now, they went about their lives, shaped by the rules they lived by, the responsibilities they carried, and the small, quiet moments that made life feel real and unpredictable. The stop had seemed ordinary, but in reality, it had opened a small window into a world each of them experienced differently, a world where chance meetings could leave lasting impressions without either of them realizing it. Officer Daniels couldn't stop thinking about the woman. Days passed, and he found himself revisiting the encounter in his mind. It wasn't unusual for him to notice something about a person during a routine stop, but this felt different. There was a quiet strength in the way she carried herself, a self-assurance that was rare. He tried to shake the thought, but every time he closed his eyes, he could see her calm expression, the way she had spoken with respect and composure. He returned to his routine patrols, responding to calls, checking streets and ensuring the city was safe. But even in the middle of the night, the memory of her lingered. It was not just curiosity. It was a subtle recognition that something about her was extraordinary. He didn't know why, but a feeling of connection started forming, one that he could neither explain nor ignore. Meanwhile, the woman was fully aware of the delicate balance she had to maintain. Living in the shadow of a powerful parent meant constantly measuring every interaction, every word spoken. She walked the city streets, enjoying her anonymity while carefully avoiding attention. Even a simple coffee run required vigilance. The stop with Daniels had been a minor incident in the grand scheme of her life, but it had left an impression. Most people treated her as someone ordinary, but she knew when someone saw beyond the surface. As the days passed, both of them unknowingly became part of the same rhythm. Daniels started noticing her presence in subtle ways, passing her at intersections, glimpsing her car in quiet parking lots, but each time, she seemed to be somewhere else. It was as if fate was guiding their paths without their knowledge. He resisted the urge to follow or investigate too deeply, aware of the line between professional curiosity and personal intrusion. One evening, Daniels was at his desk reviewing old reports when he came across a case he had almost forgotten. It involved a situation that required patience, observation, and discretion, qualities that reminded him of the woman. He realized that the encounter with her had sharpened his attention in ways he hadn't anticipated. It was a small lesson in observation and judgment, one that left him reflecting on how much he truly saw when he met someone for the first time. The woman, on the other hand, continued her cautious life. She moved through her days aware of the invisible threads that connected her to the wider world. Her father's position demanded vigilance, but she yearned for moments of normalcy. Encounters with ordinary people like Daniels were rare and precious. She could sense the honesty in him, the way he treated people fairly without assumptions. It was a rare quality in a world that often judged appearances before actions. One afternoon, Daniels drove through a quiet neighborhood and saw a familiar figure walking along the sidewalk. His heart skipped a beat, but he reminded himself to act normally. He slowed his car to a stoplight nearby and observed her from a distance. She walked with purpose, yet her awareness of her surroundings was subtle but unmistakable. He wondered what her life was like, what she thought about when she moved through the world unnoticed, and what secrets she carried with her. The woman noticed a police car pass slowly in the distance, and for a brief moment her instincts kicked in. She had learned over the years to remain calm, to control her reactions even when her senses were heightened. She kept walking, allowing herself a small, private smile. The man in the car was just doing his job, nothing more. She had learned to read people, to see the intentions behind their eyes, and she trusted that he was sincere. Still, there was a sense of connection she couldn't fully explain, a feeling that someone out there saw the world in a way that resonated with her own perception. Daniels found himself driving around for longer than usual that day, trying to understand why he was so drawn to a simple encounter. He thought about the way she had handled herself, her calmness under scrutiny and her ability to maintain dignity in any situation. He realized that even brief interactions could leave a lasting impact if observed carefully. It was a reminder that people were more than what they seemed, that every individual carried a story invisible to others. The woman returned home that evening and reflected on the encounter. She knew that he had seen her for who she was, at least partially, and it left her thoughtful. She appreciated moments when someone treated her as a person, rather than a name, a position, or a story. It was a rare gift, and it reminded her of the value of normal interactions. She sipped tea quietly, looking out her window at the city below, feeling a strange sense of connection to someone she had barely met. For Daniels, the days became a careful dance of observation and restraint. He continued his duties with professionalism, but he allowed himself to notice the small details that made life vivid. The way people walked, the way they spoke, the subtle expressions that revealed character. The encounter with the woman had awakened a curiosity about the human experience, a reminder that even routine moments could hold meaning. He began keeping mental notes not out of suspicion, but out of respect for the depth of ordinary lives. The woman continued navigating her world carefully, aware that ordinary moments could quickly turn extraordinary if mismanaged. She had learned to balance visibility with discretion, maintaining her privacy while engaging with the world. Every encounter required thought, every interaction required awareness. Yet she found herself hoping that these small moments, like the one with Daniels, could continue. They were simple, human, and genuine, qualities that were rare in her life. One afternoon, their paths crossed again in a public place, completely by chance. Daniels noticed her from across the street, and she glanced in his direction as well. There was a brief moment of recognition, a silent acknowledgement of the shared history between them. Neither approached directly, but the awareness created a quiet tension, an unspoken understanding that their stories were connected in ways they could not yet define. The encounter left both of them thoughtful. Daniels continued his patrol with renewed focus, reflecting on the rare moments when people showed their true selves, even briefly. The woman walked on, aware of the fleeting connection, appreciating it for what it was, a moment of genuine recognition in a world filled with assumptions and appearances. As night fell, both returned to their routines, carrying the memory of that afternoon. For her, it was a reminder that even in a life filled with caution, brief moments of human connection could be found. For him, it was a lesson in observation, patience, and understanding. Their worlds were different, shaped by distinct responsibilities, but the encounter had created a subtle bond, invisible yet impactful. Neither realized how these small threads would continue to weave through their lives, leading to events that would test their instincts, judgments, and understanding of one another. For now, they returned to the ordinary, yet the extraordinary lingered, quietly shaping the next steps in their stories. A prelude to a meeting that would eventually bring truths to light and force them to confront the reality behind first impressions. The day had been long for Officer Daniels. Reports, traffic checks, and routine patrols had filled his shift, but even amidst the normalcy, he couldn't shake the thought of her. He had seen her before, yes, but that fleeting recognition from a distance lingered in his mind. Something about her remained different from anyone else he had met on the job. He often caught himself scanning the streets, half expecting to see her again, yet aware that coincidence alone was not something to chase recklessly. The woman had a similar sense of awareness. She moved carefully through the city, conscious of her surroundings and the people she passed. Her life was one of quiet vigilance even when performing the most ordinary tasks. She walked through a busy market that afternoon, keeping her head low, blending into the crowd. Even in a bustling environment, she maintained a kind of controlled calm, observing without being noticed. As fate would have it, their paths crossed again, this time in a more crowded setting. Daniels was patrolling an event in the city, a local fair that drew families and small crowds. He was there to monitor traffic and ensure safety. Nothing extraordinary, but enough to keep him alert. He noticed a woman moving against the crowd's flow, confident, calm, and unmistakably familiar. It was her. He slowed his pace, careful not to draw attention, and watched her blend into the crowd while keeping her gaze aware of her surroundings. She noticed him too, briefly, and their eyes met across the distance. For a fraction of a second, the world felt smaller, a quiet acknowledgement passing between them. Neither spoke, but the familiarity of the encounter brought a moment of clarity to both. She understood that he was observant, kind, and respectful. He realized that she carried herself with dignity and awareness that extended far beyond ordinary behavior. Daniel's curiosity was tempered by respect. He didn't approach her directly, but allowed himself to notice the small details. The way she adjusted her posture when walking through the crowd, the subtle movements of her hands, the quiet confidence in her stride. He could see the care she took in maintaining her composure, and it impressed him. He recognized that not everyone could move through the world with such control and awareness. This was not arrogance. It was discipline, experience, and necessity. The woman, for her part, acknowledged the brief moment with a subtle nod in her mind. She appreciated his awareness, understanding that not everyone would notice such nuances. The city around them moved like a river, full of motion and noise, yet in that fleeting encounter, time seemed to slow. She felt a small sense of relief knowing that someone could see beyond appearances, even if only in part. Later, Daniels walked through the event, blending into the crowd as part of his duty. He kept a professional distance but allowed himself to notice her interactions. She moved with purpose, engaging in polite conversations with vendors and passers-by, yet always aware of the people observing her. Daniels could see the intelligence and attentiveness in her every action. He realized that her presence commanded respect without demanding it, a rare quality that left an impression on him. Meanwhile, the woman found a quiet corner to observe the event. She had learned to take brief pauses in public to assess her surroundings. Her father's influence required her to be cautious at all times, but she also wanted to enjoy small moments of normal life. She watched children running and couples chatting, feeling a brief connection to a world that was simple and unburdened. It was these moments she cherished, and she appreciated when others treated her without assumptions, as she had observed Daniels doing. The fair went on, with music playing and laughter filling the air. Daniels continued his rounds, keeping an eye on the crowd, but his thoughts occasionally drifted back to her. He thought about the way she had handled their first encounter, her calmness and her polite confidence. He admired the composure she maintained, despite the world being unpredictable and sometimes chaotic. He reflected on how rare it was to meet someone who could navigate ordinary life with such clarity and awareness. As the evening approached, the crowd began to thin. The woman moved toward the exit, her attention still on her surroundings. Daniels followed at a discreet distance, ensuring her safety without making his presence obvious. He was not intervening because of her identity, but because part of his duty was to keep the city safe and monitor the environment. Yet he couldn't ignore the growing awareness that there was something extraordinary about this ordinary-looking person walking ahead of him. They reached a quieter street outside the fair, and she paused to adjust her bag. Daniels approached the corner cautiously, intending to perform a casual check of the area. They finally walked closer, and she noticed his presence fully for the first time since the initial stop. A small, polite smile crossed her face, an acknowledgement of recognition without words. She had learned that subtlety was often more powerful than direct communication, especially in her life. Daniels returned the smile with professional courtesy, keeping his voice calm.
"Evening," he said.
She nodded in response, her expression composed but not distant. They did not exchange names or personal information. Neither needed to. The mutual understanding was clear. Both recognized the shared connection of a previous encounter, and both respected the boundaries that life had created between them. For a few moments, they stood quietly, observing each other and the street around them. The city seemed quieter here, away from the noise of the fair. The calmness allowed a sense of mutual respect to form, subtle but significant. Daniels felt a growing admiration for her poise and awareness. She appreciated the same qualities in him: the respect, the observation, the understanding that some encounters required discretion and patience. After a short pause, she moved along, continuing her journey. Daniels watched her leave, reflecting on how a simple coincidence had brought them together again. He understood that some people could change the perception of ordinary life, reminding you that even routine events held layers of meaning and connection. He continued his patrol with a heightened sense of awareness, appreciating the depth that brief, genuine encounters could bring. The woman returned to her apartment, carrying with her the memory of the quiet acknowledgement. She thought about the officer, the way he had treated her with fairness and attention without intrusion. In a life filled with assumptions and scrutiny, such experiences were rare and valuable. She appreciated moments when ordinary people could act with integrity, reinforcing her belief in the importance of human connection. Daniels returned to the station later that evening, filing reports and reflecting on the day. The encounter had reminded him that even in routine work, there were moments that stood out, moments that required subtle observation and thoughtful consideration. He realized that people often carried more than what met the eye, and that brief interactions could leave lasting impressions if approached with respect and attentiveness. For both of them, the day ended with a quiet awareness that their paths were intertwined in ways subtle and unspoken. Neither knew what future encounters would bring, but they had each recognized the value of observation, respect, and discretion. It was a lesson that extended beyond the immediate moment, reminding them that life was full of intersections, brief meetings that could leave an enduring mark, and shared experiences that went unnoticed by the world, but remained vivid to those involved. The night settled over the city, and both returned to their respective routines. Yet the memory of the encounter lingered, quietly shaping the way they perceived ordinary moments. Each would carry it forward, aware that the next meeting could reveal more, that chance encounters sometimes held more significance than immediate understanding. The threads of their connection were forming, invisible yet impactful, guiding their actions and thoughts, creating anticipation for the unfolding of a story that neither could predict, yet both would feel the effect of in subtle ways. The city was quiet that evening, with a soft breeze carrying the faint smell of rain from the clouds above. Officer Daniels was making his final rounds, checking streets, traffic signals, and ensuring that all was calm. He had finished his reports and was driving with a sense of focus, but there was an unusual alertness in him tonight, a feeling that something was about to happen. Little did he know, it would be the night that would change his understanding of the woman he had met. The woman was also on the move. She had an errand to run, something minor but requiring her attention. She drove carefully through the streets, observing her surroundings, aware of the night's quiet stillness. It was rare for her to feel completely relaxed in public spaces, but she trusted her awareness and instincts. The city had a way of feeling both familiar and unpredictable, and she had learned to navigate both sides. Daniel spotted a car parked awkwardly on the side of a street, its hazard lights blinking faintly. He slowed down and recognized her vehicle immediately. His pulse quickened slightly, not because of suspicion but because he had been anticipating a possible encounter. He parked his car at a safe distance and approached on foot, maintaining a professional demeanor while allowing himself to observe her actions. She noticed him approaching and paused for a brief moment. There was no fear in her expression, only acknowledgement. She had anticipated that he might cross paths with her again, given the unusual coincidence of their previous meetings. She remained calm, her hands lightly resting on the steering wheel. There was a quiet confidence in the way she faced him, an understanding that discretion was important. "Evening," Daniel said, his tone polite yet carrying a hint of curiosity. She nodded in return, maintaining the subtle warmth that had characterized their earlier encounters. Neither rushed into conversation. Both understood the importance of patience, of letting moments unfold naturally. It was not just about politeness, but about trust, about seeing how the other reacted without preconceptions. As they stood there, a brief interruption occurred. A minor traffic incident nearby required Daniel's immediate attention. He moved toward it swiftly, professionally, while she waited. Observing his focus and calm execution, she was impressed by his dedication, recognizing the traits that made him effective in his work: attention to detail, composure under pressure, and respect for others involved. Once the situation was resolved, Daniels returned to her side. There was a sense of mutual understanding now, a subtle bridge forming between their lives. She took a deep breath, knowing that the time had come to reveal a part of herself. The careful balance of secrecy and normalcy she had maintained could no longer remain entirely hidden. Not if misunderstandings were to be avoided. "Officer Daniels," she began softly, "there's something I should tell you." He looked at her attentively, sensing the seriousness in her tone. She continued, choosing her words carefully, not wanting to alarm him but wanting honesty to prevail. "I'm not just an ordinary citizen. My father is the director of the CIA." Daniels blinked, processing the information. He took a step back, not out of fear but out of surprise. The realization hit him slowly, connecting the dots of the unusual composure, the awareness, and the careful discretion she had displayed in all their encounters. He nodded slowly, acknowledging her revelation without judgment. "I see," he said quietly. "Thank you for telling me." She gave a small, appreciative smile. "I didn't want to complicate your work or put anyone in a difficult situation. I just wanted you to understand why I sometimes act the way I do." Daniels understood completely. His mind reflected on their previous meetings. The calm demeanor, the quiet observation, the moments of subtle connection. Everything suddenly made sense, but he felt no resentment or frustration, only a deep respect for her choices and her situation. They walked along the quiet street, the city lights casting gentle shadows. She explained briefly the need for privacy in her life, how even ordinary actions required careful consideration because of her family's responsibilities. Daniels listened attentively, understanding the burden she carried while also appreciating her desire to live as normally as possible. There was a balance between public duty and personal freedom, and she managed it with grace. As they continued, a brief moment of vulnerability emerged. She admitted that the encounters with him had been surprisingly comforting, a rare instance where someone treated her without assumptions, without curiosity beyond respect. Daniels felt a similar acknowledgement. He had met someone extraordinary and had not judged, and that had created a small but meaningful connection. The night grew darker, and they found themselves at a small park nearby. They paused near a bench, the quiet sounds of the city wrapping around them. She thanked him for his professionalism, his fairness, and his ability to see her as a person rather than a story or a headline. Daniels responded with sincerity, expressing admiration for her composure, intelligence, and the way she navigated a world that demanded both discretion and awareness. There was no pressure to continue the conversation beyond what felt natural. They allowed the silence to linger, filled with mutual respect and understanding. It was a rare moment, both personal and human, highlighting the subtle but powerful connection formed over a series of chance encounters. The ordinary had become extraordinary simply because of attention, honesty, and observation. Eventually she rose to leave, the night still calm around them. Daniels watched her go, feeling a sense of closure for this chapter of their encounters, but also an awareness that life would continue to bring unexpected crossings. They had both learned that respect, understanding, and subtle human connections could have a profound impact, even without words or immediate explanations. She returned to her apartment, reflecting on the evening and the relief of finally sharing a piece of her life. She felt lighter, the weight of secrecy slightly eased by honesty. She knew the city would continue to hold its ordinary rhythms, but moments like this reminded her that trust and connection could exist even in unusual circumstances. Daniels returned to his patrol car. Completing his final rounds for the night, he reflected on the encounters with her over the past weeks. The stop, the brief recognition in public, the moments of silent acknowledgement. Each had taught him lessons about observation, patience, and understanding. He realized that life often offered more than what appeared on the surface, that people carried unseen stories, and that simple human decency could create meaningful bonds. The city settled into a quiet night, and both returned to their lives, changed subtly but significantly. She could continue her carefully balanced life, and he could continue his duty with renewed insight into the depth behind ordinary encounters. The story of a chance traffic stop had become a narrative of connection, respect, and revelation, leaving both of them with an understanding of the extraordinary that can exist within ordinary moments. And while they would move forward in their separate paths, the memory of this night, the understanding of honesty, and the quiet acknowledgement of each other's presence would remain. It was a reminder that life was made of fleeting encounters that, when handled with care, could leave lasting impressions, teach lessons about integrity, and reveal the human side behind every role, every duty, and every secret carried quietly in the heart.